Thank you for joining us virtually as our experts, Dr. Irene Lai and Dr. Laurent Taimans, discuss the medical risk landscape. Over the past years, we observed stability in our medical risk ratings globally, compared to our global security risk ratings, which tend to be more volatile. All would expect, however, that due to COVID-19 and the strain on public health systems, medical risk ratings would shift drastically. Utilizing our risk rating algorithm, our experts today will share their views on the future impact, as well as their key predictions and recommendations for organizations to consider when assessing medical risk ratings of a specific location. So, first, Dr. Lai, until now, how do you explain our global medical risk ratings having remained constant over the past years?
Thanks, Kayla. So the medical risk ratings, which are given at a country level, they're not given at a sublocation, a city or an area. It's at a country level, and so it's quite a high level perspective on the medical risk. And they give an indication of the level of health support and preparation that organisations can provide for their staff. And the riskier the rating, obviously, the greater the limitations of the in-country healthcare and public health systems. But the factors that we use to determine the risk ratings, we've got about 20, just over 20 indicators that we look at, which are internal data sources, public data sources, but as well as the operational knowledge of our regional medical experts. They are factors that look at that contribute to a healthy population. And these factors tend to change slowly over time. So, for example, we have measures of how robust the healthcare system is, reliability of emergency medical care, for example, the ambulance system, the quality of care in the emergency room or inpatient care. How good is the improved water and sanitation? You know, what's the percentage across the country? And these sorts of things at a background level, they take years to improve. And whilst that they may fluctuate, particularly the healthcare system may fluctuate as you have an outbreak of COVID, it generally recovers to, the pre-COVID status. So we don't want to measure these ebbs and flows, because those ebbs and flows will happen with any country, with no matter how low the medical risk rating is, you will see those ebbs and flows. So the factors that we used to assess the medical risk rating, they tend to change slowly. So we have seen some gradual improvements in a number of countries with their background level of healthcare systems. And so they've gradually improved, and we'll assess that over a year, and some of them it's been this 5-year journey. Occasionally there are some very quick deteriorations in the medical risk landscape. And that's, for example, when there is the fall of a government or a natural disaster, that affects a lot of the country. It's going to take years to recover from. And so occasionally we will see a number of countries that will increase their medical risk rating because of those factors. But in general, it's a very slow evolution. And so it may take, on the factors that we assess, it may take several years for a country to improve or deteriorate.
Great. Thank you very much, Dr. Lai. Now, Dr. Taimans, with the COVID-19 pandemic, we observed healthcare systems, as Irene just alluded to, push to their brink, which we usually only witness due to an act of war. So in light of this volatility, what could be the long-term impacts?
I think really clearly, when we look at the pandemic, it has an acute impact on healthcare systems, and then it's going to have a long-term impact. We manage the acute impact not necessarily by modifying the country medical risk guides or the country medical risk ratings, but by actually having an overlay impact using the COVID impact scales, which are basically an indication of the impact on the healthcare system of COVID. We looked at several indicators. It was 6. We've added a 7th one recently, talking about vaccination. But it's really been an acknowledgement that it's going to have an acute impact. But as time goes on, we also need to recognize that the pandemic is going to become endemic. We're not looking at a model where the virus is going to be eradicated, but the virus will still be in the population, and it will have it will have impacts on the healthcare systems. Now, it'll have reactionary impacts, when there's going to be a surge, but also healthcare systems are going to adapt to better cope with the virus, and they're going to change. Now, it's going to be really interesting over the next few months and years to see how countries cope with the virus, and what kind of systems and what kind of processes they're going to put in place, and what kind of impact it's going to have. And it's going to be a state of flux. So for the moment, what we're seeing is the tail end of the acute phase, and we're starting to see countries recognizing that, okay, we're going to live with the virus. It's going to have an impact on our society and on our healthcare system. This is what we're going to do to adapt with it, and this is what we said. This is how we adapt to it. And of course, time will only tell how efficient it is.
Great. Thank you very much, Dr. Taymans. A question for both of you to summarize. So as the pandemic continues to evolve, what would be your guidance to organizations when coming to assess the health risks of a country or sublocation? Dr. Lai, maybe you want to start?
Thank you, Kayla. So information is the important thing here. Things can change very quickly. And so whilst it's important to look at the country risk rating as your starting point, and the country risk rating can be used to compare, it's almost like a comparator between, if you're looking at several different locations, where's your starting point for how much attention you need to pay to those locations. But you also need to monitor all of the factors that we assess to provide that country risk rating, but not just at the country level, at the destination level or the particular location that you're interested in. And things can change very quickly. And so it's not just, the environmental risk that is the location, for example, is it an earthquake prone location? Because at the moment there's no earthquake. You can start your trip, or you may be operating in that area, and if you were to be hit by a natural disaster, that would obviously change the risk landscape very quickly. But there are also other ongoing threats that are there all the time that'll ebb and flow. And so what does that mean for your particular organization? If you look at, for example, cholera in a country, there may be cholera that's always present. There's always a risk. They tend to have outbreaks on a seasonal basis. And where are you in this cycle? And, is it cholera outbreak season? Or is it, for example, the season for an increase in environmental changes like air pollution, for example? So you have to monitor all of those things and adjust how you prepare your travelers and how you respond to whatever may be going on. And of course, there's always the unusual threats. And a number of people who monitor this all the time will talk about the interval between emergence of new diseases just seems to be getting smaller and smaller. And the number of unusual threats that have popped up since the beginning of the pandemic is, it's actually astounding if you want to talk about those things. We still have unusual threats like human cases of bird flu, variant swine influenza, and some of these have pandemic potential as well. So it's a case of monitoring the information and being ready to respond to those. Laurent, what's your take on it?
Yeah, I completely agree, Irene. I think we always need to be attentive to the fact that actually information is key, right? In the end, it's one thing to be able to evaluate risk, but also being attentive to the local aspects and also the acute or the unusual nature of things. And so it's really going to be something that's going to be linked to getting the information, assessing the risk, preparing your travelers, and if things happen while the travelers are there, being able to support them in an efficient way. One thing that we also need to take into consideration is, we talked about the pandemic, and Irene alluded to it as well. Climate change and climate change events are going to have impacts on healthcare systems and on overall population health. And it's not necessarily going to be as acute, but it's going to be it's going to be subacute. It's not going to be chronic. It's really going to be something that's going to be pervasive. And it's not something that we need to be, it's something that we need to be very attentive to, because it's going to be, over time, it's going to be a significant impact on health and healthcare systems. And I think that really, that information, being able to have reliable sources of information, vetted source of information, insights, that is what really makes a difference between organizations that are prepared and ready to support their staff and to prepare for their travel, and organizations that don't necessarily keep a finger on the pulse and find themselves in a situation where they are very reactionary and actually sometimes very dangerous for their employees.
Great. Well, that just leaves me to say a very big thank you to our global health experts, Dr. Lai and Dr. Taymans, today for their insights. To receive more information on today's subject or any advice for your workforce health and security needs, please do get in touch.